Cork just slipped out of Americans' tariffs, or the cork was popped on America's tariffs, saving wineries and Portugal's biggest export. Yes, they get out of that 15% fee. Congress just shut down America's top anti-alcohol panel. We're going to discuss that. And Gen X is now into wine. It's all changed. They like wine and they're buying a lot of wine. We'll talk about that. Hey, want to grab a drink at the bar? Well, you better make some reservations first. All that and more on this week's episode of This Week Uncorked. Well, hello and welcome to episode 61 of This Week Uncorked for Monday, September 15th, 2025. I'm Brett Martin from Cork Journey. If you don't know about Cork Journey, we are your number one site for corkage fees, winery reviews, wine reviews, restaurant reviews, regional wine guides, and oh, so much more. And with that, let's get right on into this week's news. All right, well, here come the carve-outs. Wine business Cyril Penn is reporting that EU Cork from Portugal now has a exemption from the 15% tariff. From the article, the U.S.-EU Framework Agreement on Trade that took effect last week exempts Cork from the 15% tariffs on EU exports. This was a major concern for Portugal, which supplies about 70% of the world's cork, and for U.S. wineries, which depend on natural cork closures. The exemption followed intense lobbying by Portuguese diplomats, the Natural Cork Council, and California Wine Institute, all of whom argued that cork has no true domestic substitute. That's right, none. Kind of like Brad Pitt. No true domestic substitute. Yeah, it's Brad. I don't know where I'm going with that. Anyway, so that's what they did. We knew there were going to be the carve-outs. We knew it was going to happen, and there it is. There it is. So now you got that one carve-out. Now maybe wine will get a little bit of a carve-out, although it does clearly have a domestic substitute. So if that's the argument, I'm not sure it's going to happen there. But who knows? By the time next week rolls around and we're doing this show, maybe the Supreme Court will throw all the tariffs out. And everything I've talked about for the last year has just been a waste of breath. No, not the case. All right, let's move on to the next story. Wine Searcher, a U.S. anti-alcohol platform, deplatformed or panel deplatformed. This is W. Blake Gray, best wine writers in America over at Wine Searcher, basically just saying that the Interagency Coordinating Committee on the Prevention of Underage Drinking, that is the ICCPUD, or the ICPUD, we'll go with that. They're a major neo-prohibitionist platform. It's been around for 20 years. The Biden administration was really, really pushing for alcohol to be labeled very similar to cigarettes. Surgeon General came out and said no consumption of alcohol is safe. There's been this entire move. Well, I guess we don't have to worry about that, at least for the next 4 years or so. So here's what happened from the article. This is what happened last week. The U.S. Congress shot down a report on adult drinking that the Biden administration commissioned from ICPUD. By the way, underage drinking, we're going to talk about in a minute. The panel, which has existed for nearly 20 years, has become a stronghold for anti-alcohol advocacy groups that wanted to change U.S. drinking guidelines and policy. But with Congress cutting off its funding and refusing to allow publication of its report, ICPUD has effectively been silenced, leaving its members and allies in public health scrambling for a new platform. So this was a panel on underage drinking about to publish a report on adult drinking and the effects of that. And it was basically a highly negative report on drinking. There were a bunch of neo-prohibitionists on this panel from Canada. The panel was kind of stacked with anti-drinking advocates, if you will, which is odd if you want to have like a panel that's really looking into the truth of things. They threw out reports that said, hey, maybe moderate consumption of alcohol might have some good health effects for you. All that kind of stuff was overlooked. So anyway, ICPUD no longer ceased to exist. Their report has been shelved and their funding has been terminated. So there you go. And you know what? If you're not getting funded, why bother? Why bother with your cause? Because you got to make some money off of it. All right, and moving on with the news, Wine Searcher Kathleen Wilcox talks about patient Gen X has wine's attention. Man, I don't even know what to make of these stories. It's basically anybody who's not a boomer isn't drinking. And I'm on this cusp. I think Gen X starts in 64, 65. I'm 62, so that makes me a boomer, but my dad's a boomer. He's like 85. So I'm not sure that makes any sense whatsoever. I feel like I needed my own generation. You know what I'm saying? Anyway, back to this. So Gen X's are now basically, they're in their late 50s and they're in their 60s, and guess what? They've got expendable income, and guess what? They're buying wine. You should really generate a report on that, and fund it and see what you can do there. But the bottom line from the article, they spend about $238 billion on wine alone and account for around 27% of the category's sales, NIQ reports. Often overlooked compared to the noisier baby boomers. Man, I don't like that. Millennials and Gen Z, Gen X are about to have their time in the sun. Well, there you go. Congratulations, Gen X. Buy wine. Glad you are. Good. Another report next week that says Gen X is not drinking and they're not buying wine. We have the lowest consumption of alcohol in 90 years. That's what we read last week. It was last week. So, but evidently Gen X, they're not. They're drinking. So, and wrapping it up, let's go over to VinePair, where they have an article, What Happened to the Restaurant Bar? Basically, this is exploring the trend that's been going on at restaurants where the entire bar is reserved seating. Basically, it's where people are dining, and they're treating it as just another chair to turn. So if you're trying to turn a restaurant table twice or three times during an evening, you're trying to turn that bar seat twice or three times. They don't want you just sitting there drinking. But this is causing all kinds of problems. From the article, guests who try to pop in spontaneously, whether for a drink or a meal, often find that the bar seats are already spoken for. The early to my reservation guests, who in the past would happily sit at the bar and have a drink or two while waiting for the rest of their party. Second, the on time but my table isn't ready guests, who's eager for a cocktail but now has nowhere to go. From a restaurant's perspective, those seats are more than a place to sip a single glass of wine. They're prime revenue generators. Kind of true. I'm seeing this almost at every restaurant I go to now. And so it's kind of interesting to see, see where this trend is going with bar seats being completely reserved and you can't sit there unless you're dining. And I'm seeing it more and more and more. And it does make it a problem. And this gentleman's talking about if he had 15, 20 minutes before his reservation, he was there early and his choice was to go across the street. He ended up going to a place that was across the street, which then made him 15 minutes late for his real reservation because he went over there and had a drink while he waited. So anyway, interesting take, but not going to change anytime soon. And with that, let's get to our wine and winery of the week. Lama in Chianti Classico. This was a cool little winery, and you don't get more family-owned, family-run small boutique than Lama in Chianti Classico. We hired a private driver when we were there to take us around to several places, and he picked this one to take us to. Absolutely lovely, very small, really small production. They do a very, very nice job. And it's just a family. It's a husband and a wife and the daughter is now the winemaker and kind of runs the entire thing. We kind of sat down and really, really enjoyed our time there. Again, this is way off the beaten path as far as main wineries go, but not too far. If you're in the middle of Chianti Classico, it might be worth it. If you want something completely different, I would give a call, head on over there. They were lovely. The facilities are lovely. It's all inside though. There's some outside. They also have two little apartments too that can be rented. So there are people like touring wine country staying at those apartments. So anyway, worth checking out. A small little place that I don't even know if it's ever been reviewed before because it's so small. But there you go. We gave it 5 stars. Check it out. And then our wine of the week, we're going to go with a Super Tuscan. This is the 2022 Tenuta Guado al Tasso il Bruciato. Bruciato. Hey, I got it. Anyway, we gave it 90 points. It is basically a nice little blend of Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, Syrah, little Cab Franc, $34 a bottle. That's when you got a winner. Reasonably priced, 90 points, excellent value. Picked it up at a grocery store when we were over there. Winner across the board. So I think you can find it on the shelves here as well. So if you can, check that out. You will not be disappointed. And with that, let's head over to our restaurant and Corkage of the week. All right. So no Corkage because this restaurant's in Texas. And even though some restaurants in Texas say they have a Corkage and they do charge a Corkage, most restaurants, it's really not allowed. So no Corkage here. This is in Houston. This is actually at, I think, the Marriott Marquis, and it is Xochi. It's a Oaxacan Mexican cuisine. Really, really nice restaurant with an amazing, you normally aren't going to see this at a hotel restaurant. They have a mole pairing, which is like 7 courses, all with mole. Just seeing the screen. Insects is one of them. You name it, just a lot of mole. Hugo Ortega is the chef there. And I will tell you, this place it's a find across the board. It's just so rare that you can come across something like this. But anyway, we absolutely, it was a hit. Went twice there. It was so good when we were in Houston. And next time I go to Houston, I will hunt this place down. Reasonably priced in kind of the $50 to $100 range, 5 stars, easy to find, perfect location next to the convention center. So if you're in Houston, going to a convention, because I don't know why else you go to Houston, but if you go there, my apologies to people in Houston. Anyway, check out Xochi. I think you will like it. And with that, we're going to wrap things up. As always, we would love it if you would subscribe to us on our YouTube channel, follow us on your social media app. Hey, and check out that video we've got below with our interview with Remy Jean from Chateau Leonard. Really proud of it. Really like it a lot. So anyway, hope you have a great weekend, and until we see you next week, cheers.